Good morning. Back thousands of years ago, when humans first stopped being hunter-gatherers, half of us born in any one year would be dead in 30 years. By the start of the Industrial Revolution about 200 years ago, that number had increased slightly to 35 years. That's as long as our bodies are designed to live. So today, in the developed world, when our life expectancies are 80 years and beyond, those of us who've had the good fortune to reach that point, and there are a number of us in the audience today, we have certainly much to be grateful for. But we must acknowledge that our bodies have pretty much outlived their warranties. It's kind of like me driving over here on 8-lane I-85 in my old 1972 Carmen Ghia convertible. That was quite the fashion plate in those days, wasn't it? So, what do those of us who are lucky enough to live into our 80s reflect upon? You know, I've read a lot of books that talk about the phases of life. There's the famous three-phase analogy. You learn, you earn, and you return. Carl Jung talked about building pillars in the first half of your life that you would use in the second half of your life. Lots of folks like to talk about the 4 quarters of life, making it sort of analogous to a football game. The problem with these books is that in my case, by the time I had developed the maturity and intellectual curiosity to take them seriously, I was already in my later stages. George Carlin, one of my favorite comedians, had a funny routine comparing the gentleness of baseball with the brutality of football. The last line is, baseball has no time limit. You don't know when it's going to end. It might have extra innings. Football, on the other hand, is on a rigid time frame, and it will end even if we have to go to sudden death. Now, I prefer the baseball analogy for obvious reasons. So let me share with you what I am doing with my extra innings. I'll take you back 7 years. My life had been very full and rewarding and greatly without tragedy. I had been lucky. I'd had a successful career in the corporate world and a very rewarding second career in public service. I had lived overseas. I had been in the military. I had enjoyed the love of 2 good women who were my first and second wives. I had 4 children, all of whom were good people and had found good life partners. I had 5 grandchildren with more to come. I had lived a life I could be proud of, and I kind of felt like I had nothing more to prove. What I had not considered is that before I left the field, so to speak, there would be a 10th inning, an 11th inning, and maybe more. I needed to keep playing. I attended my first UUCA service back at the old building on Cliff Valley many, many years ago. I would come back sporadically, as many of us do. But 7 years ago, I was here for an Easter service. And you know you've always got to go to church on Christmas and Easter. On that day, I decided to stop just popping in and really stay, to surrender. And in surrendering, I had to face questions that had no obvious answers. I had to go beyond the tiny, ordered world that I had found comfort in and explore a new path, a spiritual one. I decided to stake my claim here, to join people who put their faith into action and are dedicated to, let's say it together, transforming lives through creation, action, and soulful connection. To let our music carry me like the wonderful music we hear today. Some of my favorite lyrics are drifting, or how deeply you're connected to my soul, and from one of our favorite hymns, drifting here with my ship's companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the light of the heavens in our beautiful blue boat home. Until I became a member of this congregation, I had never really nurtured a sense of curiosity about where I fit in the universe. Now I think about that a lot. They say there are 400 billion stars in our Milky Way galaxy, and our sun is just one of them. There are over 100 billion galaxies in an ever-expanding universe that's over 13 billion years old. We humans have existed on this planet for about 250,000 years and really have only had any marks of civilization in the last few thousand years. When I try to wrap my hand around all this, all I can say is, wow. And just maybe I can afford to pause for a second and take current events and myself a little less seriously. It was here at UUCA, inspired every Sunday by the motivating words and deeds of our ministerial staff, and even more so by the daily examples of so many of you kindred souls in this congregation. I have grown. I honestly believe that while I'm still a work in progress, today I am less judgmental. I have developed more empathy for those who struggle in ways that I never have. I have found my own personal connection with the divine, not to God as conventionally conceived, but to something much greater than myself. Each Sunday, when we say that we surrender to a mystery beyond ourselves, I am comforted. The concepts that I believed in and worked in my days of advocacy, fairness, and respect for the individual were things that I believed in my head, but here I've learned to believe them in my heart as well. So I am comforted more than ever in believing that our good deeds are not squandered, that the long moral arc of the universe does bend toward justice, and that the unbroken procession of generations of humanity is on the path to the day when there will be no more wars, and we will learn to take care of Mother Earth and take care of each other. I will continue to do what I can towards those goals as long as I can, enjoying each day to the fullest, satisfied that when my last pilgrimage comes to an end, that my brief presence here will have been with purpose. So to everyone here with me today, whom I share this final journey, I want to thank you. Thank you for being my ship's companions and my kindred pilgrim souls.
It was pouring down rain in Houston. I remember parking my car on higher ground and wading home through flooded streets. When I got home, I found a notice of a registered letter. It was for me. I'd never received one before. I went and collected it, and what I found was a card inside. It had orange, gold, and blue flowers on the front. It welcomed me to come on in, and so I did. Inside that card was one handwritten sentence that said, "I knew you for a very short time many years ago." And it had a date, November 15th, 1961. If you would like to meet, please contact me. Well, I didn't recognize the name, but I instinctively recognized the sender, my birth mother. And so that began my pilgrimage. I always knew I was adopted. I grew up feeling like I was handpicked from a specialty store for babies. And like many babies, I had low iron levels on the day my parents were to collect me from the Sheltering Arms orphanage. They had a big celebration planned for my arrival home. And when the news arrived that my delivery would be delayed, everyone, friends, neighbors, everyone cried. And trust me, these folks, these people were pretty stoic. They were not criers. You know, my mom used to tell me that she had a 6-month return policy on me. She was 39 years old, and she was at that point considered an older mother. But then she always used to tell me that the first time she held me, she looked into my eyes, she knew she could never cash in on that policy. All this to say, I grew up feeling special, feeling wanted, feeling loved. Okay, back to the registered letter. I really struggled with the decision to meet or to not meet my birth mother. I vacillated between the dream of 2 families blending together in harmony, and then on the other hand, possibly hurting my parents. Because my birth mother lived in the New York area, my partner Dennis, he suggested that if I decide to meet her, that we meet at a New York Mets baseball game. Seemed like a great idea. I could decide in the moment as I walked into the stadium, as I got close to the seat, I could decide, you know, if I should go through with it or not. He said, when you get to the stadium, you can always change your mind, and I'll support you either way. Well, I love baseball. I like the New York Mets, and I really love the intrigue. So that idea I really loved. In the end, though, I chose not to meet my birth mother then. I was in my mid-20s. My mom and dad were really important people in my life. And honestly, I just had that kind of nagging, that icky feeling that meeting her at that point would just open a can of worms, a Pandora's box that I could never again unopen. So I wrote her a letter, handwritten letter. I thanked her for contacting me, but I declined her offer to meet. You know, over 30 years later, rereading that letter, wow. I would have written a very different letter today. As I read it, I feel embarrassed, mortified really, by how terse, how factual, how uncaring I seemed. Who was I back then? Well, time marched on. You know, I finished college, got a job, moved here to Atlanta, joined UUCA. I was just living my life. But have you ever had that nagging kind of feeling when you feel like you've left something undone, unfinished? It's like having dirty dishes in the sink. Those dirty dishes, they were always living inside of me. So when my dad died, my mom died, my brother died, my aunt died, my uncle, I had one cousin, he died. I felt like an orphan again. Not a sad, lonely orphan, but really a lucky one. I felt grateful for the small family that I had. But I also felt like it was time to tidy up, to wash those dirty dishes, to accept the offer I received more than 30 years ago to meet my birth mother. Well, I found her on Facebook. She was retired and living in a small town in Norway. She visited New York every year, so we agreed to meet in New York City. Our first meeting felt like a scene from a movie. The hotel lobby elevator comes down very slowly. The doors open up, and through tears and laughter, mother and daughter embrace for the very first time. It was wonderful. During our 5 days together, I began to understand her story. She had been misled, deceived, and she was still harboring those feelings deeply. I also started to understand the shame that she carried in acknowledging me as her daughter, and how shame can cut so deep that you can't bring yourself to confide in anyone ever, even your family, that you have a daughter, ever. That is one heavy weight to bear. And that's a weight, a burden, I believe, that is not mine to carry. You know, waiting until this point in my life to walk my birth pilgrimage, it allowed me the perspective I couldn't have had in my 20s. A perspective to appreciate where I came from and where I am now. And where actually is that? Where am I on this pilgrimage, this transformation? You know Dorothy's line from The Wizard of Oz? There's no place like home. That line to me cultivates images of family sharing lore around a crowded table. But that's not my reality. That's not my world. For me, I believe my pilgrimage, it's taught me to recognize the need to create my home, to create a home that's filled with the most sacred and valuable of possessions, of friends who I can ask for and receive help when my life is crumbling. Friends who listen compassionately with open hearts. Friends who voluntarily taught me Mahjong every Wednesday night for 2 months. Voluntarily. Friends who invite me to concerts and book clubs and to play tennis and pickleball and to drum circles and to lead small groups with them and to travel to near and to faraway places. Of my created home here with all of you, a very valuable possession to me, where I've learned countless lessons and witnessed selfless acts of love and beauty. Like when I watched Melinda, UUCA's resident building host and vibe keeper. What a cool title. Melinda greeted a shivering young man who just wandered in from the cold. It was during a Sacred Souls program. That's our ministry for older congregants. This frigid young man, he wasn't a congregant, and he clearly wasn't old enough for our senior ministry. But Melinda noticed his freezing hands, and I watched her from afar, tearing up. And she so gently and tenderly and caringly guided each of his fingers into new warm winter gloves. Her caring and respect and beautiful act of compassion, it is burned into my brain. It reminds me of what UUCA truly stands for: honoring the worth and dignity of everything and everyone. It's also here where I've learned a lesson that guides me through life. And it's really helping me become the person I want to be in the world. When I'm faced with daily struggles, you know, the usual stuff, or even major life decisions, what I've learned up in room 222 is to ask myself this one question: what is the most loving thing I can do in this moment? It comes in so handy. It comes in really, really handy in Atlanta traffic. Truly. And of course, my very valuable possession, my created home with Dennis, my partner, who every day makes me lunch. And he waits so patiently to eat with me, even though he's really starving and I eat really late. And he finally, after a 30-year wait, got to go to that New York Mets baseball game. But you know, my pilgrimage was to meet my birth mother. I've struggled to make sense of it, to find meaning, to find the answer. I'm not sure I've found the answer. But what I have learned is that my home is the home I'm creating. A home full of friends, a home here with all of you in community, and ultimately a home filled with love. May we all create homes overflowing of friendships, meaning, and most of all, with love. May it be so.
When I hear the word pilgrimage, I picture something grand. The Camino de Santiago, hundreds of miles across Spain, pilgrims with walking sticks and worn boots, a cathedral waiting at the end, or Mecca, or Lourdes, a journey that's planned for, trained for, you save up for, a destination that justifies the walking, a final place to reach. And these pilgrimages are important and do offer transformation. But I want to suggest this morning that while most of us will never walk the El Camino, we are pilgrims nonetheless. Because a pilgrimage at its heart is not about the distance or the planning or the destination. It's about the intention to move through something, to let the walking change you. And if that's true, then the Pilgrim's Road runs right through the middle of ordinary life, through the hard seasons, difficult times, the mornings when you wake and not sure you can take another step, yet you take one anyway. Picture a trailhead and ask yourself this: what if the journey you're on is the pilgrimage? Not the one you'll take someday, not the one that requires a passport and a better pair of shoes. This one, the life you woke up to this morning. I have traveled the world, and yet I know something about walking without going anywhere. For many years, I moved through my life the way you move through a busy airport or a crowded street, efficiently, purposefully, always someplace to be. but I wasn't really there, not present to the people that I loved, not present in my own life. Going through the motions is kind of like its own motion. It can look from the outside like a journey, but there is no transformation. You just keep arriving at the same place. That is, I think, the opposite of pilgrimage. The body moves, the soul stays stuck. For me, alcohol is what made the journey of life tolerable. It masked the fears, gave a sense of false vibrato, and it worked for a while. But then it stopped working, and it totally controlled my life. The day came where the thought of living with alcohol or without were equally terrifying. A decision to change had to be made. I found myself in a very dark place, and in that darkness, I faced what I think is the essential pilgrim's question, the one that comes before any journey can begin. Do I stay here stuck, or do I make an intentional change? That question in some form is one many of you have faced, maybe not with addiction, but in your own wilderness, whatever it looked like. The moment when the familiar misery and the terrifying unknown are standing in front of you, and you have to choose which path has more pull, the status quo or the challenging unknown. I chose the challenging unknown, and that is where my real pilgrimage began. Here's the thing about pilgrimage that the postcard version gets wrong. It looks like a solo journey. One person, one road, one destination. But almost no one who has actually walked a long and difficult road will tell you that they walked it alone. The Camino is full of strangers who become companions. Every spiritual journey in our tradition and others involves guides, fellow travelers, people who have walked ahead and left markers for those still finding their way. Recovery gave me that. People who knew the terrain because they had stumbled through it themselves, who didn't need me to pretend I was fine, who handed me something to hold on to when I had nothing left. The pilgrimage was mine to walk, but I did not walk it alone, and I could not have. There is a phrase in recovery that I come to think of as one of the most profound spiritual wisdoms I know: one day at a time. It sounds simple. It is not simple. It is, in fact, the entire practice. Traditional pilgrims understand this intuitively. Those who have walked the Camino didn't wake up each morning thinking about the end. They thought about today's miles, today's weather, whether their feet would hold, the village at the end of today's road. The destination exists, but it is not where your attention lives. Your attention lives in the walking. And that is how I try to live now. Each morning I wake up and set an intention, not for the rest of my life, not even for the week, just for today. To be more loving, to be present, really present to the people in front of me, to be useful in whatever small way the day asks. Some days I do that well, and some days I don't. But the intention is the staff that I pick up every morning before I start walking. And here is where my pilgrimage parts ways with the traditional one. The Camino ends, you walk to Santiago, you receive your certificate, you stand in that great cathedral and you know, I have arrived. There's a completion to it, a before and an after. My journey doesn't end, not because I haven't made progress. I have much more than I could have imagined, but because what began as a road that I was forced to find has become the only way I want to live. The pilgrimage didn't lead me to a destination, it led me to a practice, to a way of moving through the world with intention, with presence, and with gratitude for the day that I actually have. I am not walking towards sobriety anymore. I am walking as a sober person. There is a difference. The road is not something I'm enduring until I arrive. The road is the life. So I want to ask you something before we wrap up our journey this morning. What is your pilgrimage? Not the one you dream about taking, not the spiritual retreat you'll go on one day, or the version of yourself that will happen when things settle down. I mean the one you're already on. The hard thing you're moving through right now, or the stuck place you've been circling for longer than you care to admit. Because I believe everyone in this room knows something about wilderness and feeling lost, about going through the motions without really being truly present, about standing at that threshold, the one where suffering is on one side and the terrifying unknown is on the other. Maybe your wilderness is grief, or a relationship you've outgrown, a version of yourself that no longer fits but feels safer than the unknown, a habit, a fear, a silence that has gone on too long. Whatever it is, you are not lost. You are already on the road, and you're not walking it alone. Look around you. The community, these people, they are your fellow pilgrims. Some have walked further down a particular road than you have, and they have left markers. Some are just finding the trailhead. All of them are walking. The invitation this morning is simply this: take one step, not the whole journey, just today's step, with intention, with presence, with the willingness to let the walking change you. That is pilgrimage, not necessarily a cathedral at the end of the road. This, right here, the life you are already living, walked with open eyes and an open heart, one day at a time.